we're still at the early stages of sort of a big LEO constellation communication idea. I think the long-term potential of it is pretty great, but I don't want to overplay or overstate, things quite, this, or any stage of the game really. But the long-term goal is to create a comprehensive global communication system that provides high bandwidth, low latency connectivity anywhere in the world, and provides cross-links through the satellites so that you can have improved long-distance internet. You can actually have a more direct path through space, and photons move faster. I mean, depending upon what fiber optic material they're running through, photons actually move about 40 to 50% faster in vacuum than they do in fiber optic cables.
And what we want to do for satellites is we want to revolutionize the satellite side of things, just as we've done with the rocket side of things. The satellites constitute as much or more of the cost of sort of a space-based activity as the rockets do. So very often, actually, the satellites are more expensive than the rocket. So in order for us to really revolutionize space, we have to address both satellites and rockets. And we're going to start off by building actually our own constellation of satellites. But that same satellite bus and the technology we developed can also be used for science, earth science and space science, as well as other potential applications that others may have. The focus is going to be on creating a global communication system. This is quite an ambitious effort. So we're really talking about something which is, in the long term, it would be like rebuilding the internet in space. And the goal will be to have a majority of long-distance internet traffic go over this network, and about 10% of local consumer and business traffic. Speed of light in vacuum is somewhere 40 to 50% faster than in fiber. So you can actually do long-distance communication faster if you route it through vacuum than you can if you route it through fiber. Let's say you want to communicate from Seattle to South Africa. If you look at the actual path that it takes, it's extremely convoluted. It'll follow the outline of the continents. It'll go through 200 routers and repeaters, and the latency is extremely bad. Whereas if you did it with a satellite network, you could actually do it in 2 or 3 hops. Let's say at least an order of magnitude fewer repeaters or routers, and then going through space at 50% faster speed of light. Space is also really good for sparse connectivity. So if you've got large swaths of land where there's a relatively low density of users, space is actually ideal for that. It's something that would both provide optionality for people living in advanced countries, advanced economies, as well as people in poor countries that don't even have electricity or fiber or anything like that. So it gives optionality for people in wealthier countries. So I think it's something that definitely needs to be done, and it's a really difficult technical problem to solve. And at the same time, we also make sure we don't create Skynet. Ironically, the server room at SpaceX jokingly was called Skynet. If there's some AI apocalypse, it's going to come from some collection of sort of vast server farms, terrestrially based, not via the space-based communication system. I did think about that. Anyway, so I think this is sort of like a fundamentally good thing to do, properly designed to give people gigabit level access, kind of 20, 30 millisecond latency everywhere on Earth. That would be pretty great. And then that same system we could leverage to put it into a constellation on Mars, because Mars is going to need a global communication system too. And there's no fiber optics or wires or anything on Mars. So we're definitely going to need that. We're going to need high bandwidth communications between Earth and Mars. So I think a lot of what we do in developing an Earth-based communication system can be leveraged for Mars as well. At the altitude in question, there's really not not a lot out there. So we're talking about something at about the 1,100 kilometer level, and there's just not a lot up there. The thing we need to make sure of though is we don't want to create any issues. So we're going to make sure that we can deal with the satellites effectively and have them burn up on reentry and have the debris kind of find in the Pacific somewhere. I mean, the number of satellites we're talking about here ultimately is around 4,000. Actually, technically today, the discussion was 4,025, although there's probably false precision there, but that's kind of what we're thinking right now. And there's less than half that number in active satellites currently in existence. So this will be more than double the number of currently active satellites. Well, in the past, I've been a little optimistic on schedule. I think we should be able to get version 1 active in about 5 years. That wouldn't be the full sort of, doing half of all long distance and 10% of Earth's connectivity, but a useful version 1 that has global coverage, except the poles, we're aiming for about 5 years. And then there'll be successive versions every 2 or 3 years after that. Where the system is really at its full capability is, I think it's probably 12 to 15 years. Major revisions certainly every 5 years, maybe a little sooner than that. So if you figure, in terms of major revisions, version 1, 5 years, version 2, maybe 5 years after that, version 3, 5 years after that is rough timeline. Software and firmware is probably half of the office. So it's probably half software, half firmware. The satellites we have in mind will be quite sophisticated, and there'll be sort of a smallish satellite, but with a big satellite's capability. By smallish, I mean in the few hundred kilogram range. Well, it can't be free, because then, we've got a business. This would cost a lot to build. Ultimately, over time, to build a full proliferation of the system, we're talking about something that would, be $10 or $15 billion to create, maybe more. And this is intended to generate a significant amount of revenue and help fund a city on Mars. So this is, in looking in the long term and say what's needed to create a city on Mars? Well, one thing's for sure, a lot of money. So we need things that will generate a lot of money. Spectrum that is omnidirectional and wall penetrating, that spectrum is extremely rare and limited. Spectrum that is not wall penetrating and that is very directional is not rare. It's sort of the difference between kind of a laser beam and a floodlight. You can have lots of laser beams, in the limit that would be sort of a real tight beam communication. There's high scarcity for cellular bandwidth. There is not high scarcity for space to Earth bandwidth. Iridium satellites, which was a sort of a mere 70, we're talking, more than order of magnitude larger volume. There may be some similarities to the way that the Iridium network was done, but in terms of the production, the way it's produced, it's going to be closer to the way that a car is produced or consumer electronics. So we take things even a step further, and if the satellite didn't work, you just basically take it out of the constellation and deorbit it. An analogy might be between, say, mainframes and PCs. So if you want to have a big data center serving millions of people, it's way better to have an array of cheap PCs than it is to have a few mainframes. And that's basically how all of the internet is served with millions of PCs on racks instead of mainframes. The main propulsion system we have in mind for the satellite is a Hall effect thruster, which, not trivialize it too much, is basically like a loudspeaker. Okay, it's like a magnetic field. There's accelerating ions. It's pretty easy to make. I'm hopeful that we can structure agreements with various countries to allow communication with the system, but it is a country-by-country basis. So it's not going to take longer than 5 years to do that. And not all countries will agree at first. There'll be some countries that don't agree. It's fine. The base station would have a phased array antenna with a sort of switching time that's at the microsecond to low millisecond level. So it'll only take a few milliseconds to switch from one satellite to the next. Solar panels and then batteries for low Earth orbit satellites, because they go through Earth's shadow, then you have batteries to handle when they're in shadow. I think it's important to assume that terrestrial networks will get much better over time. One of the mistakes that, say, Taldezic made was not assuming that terrestrial networks will get much better over time. So we need to make sure that the system we design is good, even taking into account significant improvements in the terrestrial systems. I do think there are some important differences between what we're doing and say, Taldezic. In the case of Taldezic, they were trying to talk to phones. And then that gets back to that problem of a roof-penetrating situation. And it's particularly difficult when stuff is coming from space. Like if you're in a skyscraper and it's got to go through 27 floors to reach you, that's not going to happen. Like there's nothing that will, short of like a neutrino, you can have like a neutrino phone. Yeah, I think we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to security. It would really be unfortunate if it got hacked and taken over. But it's going to require a lot of thought to make sure we are able to protect it from any hacking attempts. But it's much like sort of Google and Facebook and have to handle these kind of issues. We do offer stock options and restricted stock, and we do liquidity events every 6 months. So if we have the company valued by an outside firm every 6 months, and then we will do stock buybacks every 6 months. With most ideas, the execution is really the hard part. And in order to make that happen, you need to have lots of talented people working together towards a common goal to achieve that. So that's what we want to put together at SpaceX. All right, thanks everyone.